The air inside the bunker was thick with despair. Dust clung to every surface, and the faint hum of failing generators echoed through the dimly lit corridors. Cale leaned against the cold metal wall, his rifle slung loosely over his shoulder. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows outside through a narrow crack in the reinforced door. The Vyrath were out there, always out there, hunting, waiting, relentless. Behind him, the survivors whispered nervously. There were 12 of them now, crammed into this crumbling refuge deep beneath the ruins of what had once been Chicago. They were all that remained of their group after weeks of running, hiding, and losing friends one by one. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, exhaustion weighed down their bodies, and fear clouded their minds. But worst of all was the feeling of being cornered, trapped like rats in a maze with no way out. "We can't stay here," Rin said sharply, breaking the tense silence. She stood near the center of the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her dark hair was matted with dirt, but her piercing green eyes burned with determination. "Sooner or later they'll find us." Kyle didn't turn around. He couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the faint glow of alien searchlights swept across the desolate landscape. "And then what?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "You want to charge out there with nothing but guts and prayers? That's suicide." Rin stepped closer, her boots crunching softly on the debris-strewn floor. "At least it's better than sitting here waiting to die." Cale finally turned to face her, his jaw clenched. "We're not dying today," he said firmly. "Not while I'm still breathing." Before Rin could respond, a shout came from the far end of the room. One of the younger survivors, a boy named Jace, was crouched beside an old storage crate rummaging through its contents. His hands trembled as he pulled out something strange and unfamiliar. It was a device unlike anything they'd seen before. A smooth metallic orb etched with intricate symbols that glowed faintly when touched. "It says, 'We can summon help,'" Jace stammered, holding the artifact up for everyone to see. His wide eyes darted between the others, searching for reassurance. Something even the Vyrath fear. The room fell silent. The survivors exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to believe the boy or dismiss his discovery as nonsense. Summoning help sounded impossible, or worse, dangerous. What if it brought more trouble instead of salvation? Cale approached cautiously, his brow furrowed as he examined the artifact. The symbols carved into its surface seemed both human and alien, blending languages that shouldn't exist together. He ran his fingers over the cool metal, feeling a faint vibration beneath his touch. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't ordinary. "What does it mean?" someone asked hesitantly. "I don't know," Cale admitted, his voice quieter now. "But if it's true, if we really can summon something that scares the Vyrath, then maybe it's worth the risk." Rin snorted derisively. "Or maybe it's just another trap. We've seen enough of those already." Kyle ignored her skepticism. Time was running out. The sound of scraping metal above them grew louder, signaling that the Vyrath were getting closer. If they didn't act soon, they'd be overrun. Taking a deep breath, he made his decision. "Hand it over," he said to Jace, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, the boy passed him the artifact. Cale studied it for a few seconds longer, then pressed his palm against the glowing symbols. A surge of energy coursed through his arm, and the orb began to hum loudly. "Are you insane?" Rin shouted, stepping forward. "You have no idea what you're doing." "It's too late to stop now," Cale replied grimly. The hum intensified, growing into a deafening roar that filled the entire bunker. Light spilled out from cracks in the artifact, blinding everyone in the room. For a brief moment, panic erupted as the survivors covered their faces and stumbled backward. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the light faded. Standing in the center of the room was a figure, a woman. She looked human, yet different somehow. Her clothes were sleek and futuristic, unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Her posture was confident, almost regal, and her piercing blue eyes scanned the room with quiet curiosity. "Who are you?" Cale demanded, raising his rifle instinctively. The woman raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. Relax, she said calmly. I'm not here to hurt you. She paused, glancing around at the frightened faces staring back at her. My name is Erin, and I think you just saved my life. The tension in the room didn't ease immediately. Erin's sudden appearance left everyone wary, especially Rin, who kept her hand hovering near the hilt of her knife. Questions poured out rapidly. Where did she come from? How did she get here? Was she really human? Erin answered patiently, explaining that she was from another timeline, one where humanity hadn't lost the war against the Vyrath. In her world, humans had developed extraordinary abilities, psychic powers that allowed them to manipulate minds, control machines, and even bend time itself. These powers were the reason the Vyrath feared humans so much. But such abilities came at a cost, immense physical and mental strain, often leading to madness or death. As she spoke, Cale found himself drawn to her words. There was a depth to her voice, a weight of experience that suggested she wasn't lying. Yet doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Could they trust her? Or was she simply another pawn in the Vyrath's endless game? While the others debated, Erin wandered toward the edge of the bunker, peering through the same crack in the wall that Cale had been watching earlier. Outside, the Vyrath drones continued their methodical search, oblivious to the chaos unfolding within the bunker. Erin's expression hardened as she observed them. They won't stop until you're dead, she said quietly. That's how they operate. No mercy, no compromise. So what do we do? Cale asked, joining her by the wall. His tone was cautious, testing. You fight back, Erin replied without hesitation, but not the way you've been fighting. You need to hit them where it hurts, in their pride, their arrogance. Remind them why they fear you. Cale frowned. And how exactly do we do that? Erin turned to face him, her lips curling into a faint smile. With me. Over the next hour, Erin proved herself invaluable. Using tools scavenged from the bunker, she constructed makeshift weapons and traps designed specifically to counter the Vyrath's advanced technology. She taught the survivors new tactics, emphasizing stealth and precision over brute force. When a patrol of drones approached the bunker, she led the defense effort, dismantling the attackers with efficiency that left everyone stunned. But despite her skills, not everyone trusted her. Rin watched Erin closely, her suspicions growing with each passing minute. During a brief lull in the action, she confronted Cale privately. She's hiding something, Rin insisted, her voice low but urgent. No one fights like that without a reason. What if she's working for them? What if this whole thing is a setup? Cale rubbed his temples, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He wanted to believe Erin, but Rin's concerns weren't entirely unfounded. Still, they didn't have the luxury of second-guessing every move. We don't have a choice, he said finally. If she's lying, we'll deal with it. But right now, she's our best shot at surviving. Rin scowled, but didn't press further. Instead, she stormed off, muttering under her breath about reckless decisions and misplaced trust. As night fell, the survivors regrouped in the bunker's main chamber. Exhaustion hung heavy in the air, but there was also a flicker of hope, a fragile ember that hadn't existed before Erin arrived. For the first time in weeks, they dared to dream of victory, however slim the odds might be. But Erin herself seemed troubled. Sitting alone in a corner, she stared at the glowing artifact that had brought her here. When Cale approached, she looked up, her usual confidence replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. This place isn't meant for me, she admitted quietly. Every second I stay here, I feel stretched thin, like I don't belong. Kyle sat down beside her, his expression thoughtful. What happens if you stay too long? Erin hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I disappear, she said finally, and maybe take this whole timeline with me. The gravity of her statement hit Cale like a punch to the gut. Summoning Erin had been a gamble, but now it seemed the stakes were higher than anyone realized. If she vanished, would they lose whatever advantage she offered? Or worse, would her disappearance unravel the fabric of reality itself? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the Vyrath continued their relentless search, unaware of the storm brewing within the bunker. Inside, the survivors prepared for whatever came next, clinging to the fragile hope that Erin represented. Little did they know, their journey was only beginning, and the choices they made would shape the fate of humanity itself. The bunker felt different now, less like a tomb and more like a battleground waiting to erupt. Since Erin's arrival, the survivors had begun to see glimpses of hope, fragile as it was. But hope came with questions, doubts, and fears that gnawed at the edges of their minds. Kyle watched silently as Erin moved through the room, inspecting the makeshift weapons they'd crafted under her guidance. Her movements were precise, deliberate, almost mechanical. She wasn't just teaching them how to fight, she was showing them how to survive. Again, Erin said sharply, nodding toward Rin, who stood holding a crude spear tipped with jagged metal. You're hesitating. In a real fight, hesitation gets you killed. Rin scowled, but didn't argue. Instead, she lunged forward again, this time faster and more confident. The tip of the spear grazed Erin's arm, drawing a faint line of blood. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Erin smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent shivers down Kale's spine. Better, she said, wiping the blood away with the back of her hand, but still not good enough. Kyle stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. That's enough for today. We need rest if we're going to keep up with your pace. Erin turned to him, her expression unreadable. Rest won't save us. The Vyrath don't sleep, why should we? Her words hung heavy in the air, silencing any protest before they could form. It was true. The Vyrath were relentless, tireless machines bent on extermination. But humans weren't built for endless combat. They needed breaks, food, and moments of peace, even if those moments were fleeting. As the others dispersed to tend to their wounds or grab whatever scraps of food remained, Kale pulled Erin aside. You're pushing them too hard, he said quietly, his tone firm but not unkind. They're already stretched thin. If you break them, we'll have nothing left. Erin crossed her arms, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. And what would you have me do, Kyle? Coddle them while the Vyrath close in? That's not survival, it's suicide. They're not soldiers, Kyle countered. They're just people trying to stay alive. For a moment, Erin looked away, her gaze drifting toward the glowing artifact sitting on a makeshift table nearby. Its light pulsed faintly, as if alive. Maybe, she said softly. But they're all you've got. And if they can't adapt, none of this matters. Kale opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Rin interrupted. We need to talk, she said, her voice low and urgent. She glanced at Erin, then back at Kale. Alone. Kyle nodded reluctantly, following Rin to a corner of the bunker where they wouldn't be overheard. Once they were out of earshot, Rin wasted no time getting to the point. I don't trust her, she said bluntly. She's hiding something. Kyle sighed, running a hand through his hair. He knew this conversation was coming. It had been brewing ever since Erin arrived. What makes you say that? She knows too much, Rin replied, her green eyes flashing with frustration. How does she know exactly how the Vyrath think? How to counter their tech? Even someone from another timeline wouldn't have answers like that unless… She trailed off, her voice dropping to a whisper. Unless she's working with them. Kale frowned, considering her words. It wasn't the first time someone had voiced suspicions about Erin, but every instinct told him she was on their side. Still, he couldn't ignore the possibility entirely. Do you have proof? He asked finally. No, Rin admitted, but I don't need proof to know when something feels wrong. She's dangerous, Kyle, whether she means to be or not. Before Kale could respond, a sudden commotion erupted near the entrance of the bunker. One of the younger survivors, a girl named Lyra, shouted in alarm, pointing frantically toward the door. They're here! Everyone scrambled into action. The Vyrath had found them. The battle was chaos, blinding flashes of light, deafening explosions, and the metallic screech of alien drones tearing through the air. Erin took charge immediately, barking orders with a calm authority that belied the madness around them. Kale, cover the east flank. Rin, take the high ground. Everyone else, stick to the plan. Despite the odds, the survivors fought with newfound determination. Under Erin's guidance, they used traps and improvised weapons to devastating effect. Metal shards flew like shrapnel, disabling several drones at once. Acidic chemicals spilled from containers, eating away at the Vyrath's armored bodies. For the first time in weeks, humanity held its ground. But it was Erin who truly turned the tide. As the surviving drones converged on the bunker, she unleashed something extraordinary. A burst of psychic energy that rippled outward in a wave of distortion. Drones froze mid-motion, their circuits overloaded. Others collapsed entirely, reduced to heaps of sparking metal. When the dust settled, the survivors stared at Erin in stunned silence. She stood in the center of the room, breathing heavily, her hands trembling at her sides. Sweat dripped from her brow and her face was pale, almost ghostly. "What was that?" Kyle asked, breaking the silence. Erin didn't answer right away. She sank to her knees, clutching her head as if in pain. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "A mistake." Kyle knelt beside her, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she snapped, though her tone lacked conviction. After a moment, she added more softly, "It's just harder than I thought." "Harder?" Kyle pressed. "What do you mean?" Erin hesitated, then sighed. "In my timeline, these abilities come naturally. Here, it's like forcing a square peg into a round hole. Every time I use them, it takes a piece of me with it." "Takes a piece of you?" Kale repeated, his stomach sinking. "What happens if you lose too much?" Erin avoided his gaze, staring instead at the glowing artifact in the corner. "Let's just say I don't want to find out." Later that night, after the adrenaline had worn off and the survivors had patched their wounds, Kale sought out Erin again. She was sitting alone by the artifact, her fingers tracing the glowing symbols absent-mindedly. Her earlier confidence seemed to have faded, replaced by a quiet vulnerability. "You're not telling us everything," Kyle said, sitting down beside her. "Why are you really here?" Erin didn't look at him. For a long moment she was silent, as if weighing whether to trust him. Finally she spoke. "In my timeline, humanity wins the war against the Vyrath. But it comes at a cost. We evolve, beyond what we were meant to be. Psychic powers, advanced technology, immortality. It all leads to destruction. My world is dying, Kyle. Not because of the Vyrath, but because of us." Kale listened intently, his mind racing to process her. "So why come here? What does this timeline have to do with yours?" "This artifact," Erin said, gesturing to the glowing sphere between them, "isn't just a summoning device, it's a link, a bridge between timelines. By bringing me here, you've tethered our worlds together. If I stay too long, the connection will destabilize. Both timelines could collapse." Kale felt a chill run down his spine. "Then why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because you needed me," Erin replied simply. "Without me, you'd already be dead. And maybe this timeline has a chance to succeed where mine failed." Her honesty struck Kale deeply. Despite her flaws and the risks she posed, she genuinely believed in their cause. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for all of humanity, past, present, and future. Before he could respond, Rin appeared, her expression grim. "We've got company," she said. "More Vyrath. Bigger force this time." Erin stood abruptly, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "They're learning," she muttered, "adapting." Kale grabbed her arm, stopping her. "You're not strong enough for another fight." "I don't have a choice," Erin shot back. "Neither do you." With that, she strode toward the entrance, leaving Kale and Rin to exchange uneasy glances. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. Erin wasn't just their weapon, she was their greatest gamble. As the survivors prepared for the next wave of attacks, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a razor's edge. Irin's presence had given them hope, but it had also brought uncertainty. Could they trust her? Did they even have a choice? Outside, the Vyrath closed in, their glowing red eyes scanning the darkness. Inside, humanity clung to the fragile ember of defiance lit by a woman who didn't belong. The battle ahead would test them all, but Kale knew one thing for certain. Survival wasn't just about strength, it was about sacrifice, and Irin might end up paying the highest price of all. The plan was insane, reckless, desperate, and almost certainly suicidal. But it was also their only chance. The Vyrath command station loomed above Earth like a dark cloud, its massive structure bristling with weapons and guarded by thousands of soldiers. If they could destroy it, they'd cripple the Vyrath forces below. If they failed, humanity would be wiped out completely. Irin stood at the center of the group, her expression calm but resolute. She had spent hours preparing them for this moment, teaching them how to infiltrate the station, avoid detection, and strike where it hurt most. Yet despite her confidence, Kale noticed the toll it was taking on her. Her movements were slower, now, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the straps of her gear. Every use of her psychic powers drained her further, leaving her weaker with each passing day. "We'll get through this," Kale said firmly, stepping beside her. His voice carried a mix of reassurance and determination. "Together." Irin glanced at him, her lips curling into a faint smile. "I appreciate the optimism," she replied softly. "But we both know what's at stake." Kyle didn't respond. He wanted to believe they'd make it out alive, but deep down, he feared the worst. Irin wasn't just risking her life. She was sacrificing herself for a timeline that wasn't even hers. It wasn't fair, but then again, nothing about this war had been fair. As the group boarded a stolen Vyrath transport ship, Rin approached Irin, her usual hostility replaced by something softer, grudging respect. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "We can handle the rest." Irin shook her head. "No, you can't. Not without me. And I'm not leaving until the job's done." Rin opened her mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Instead, she nodded curtly and turned away, muttering under her breath, "Stubborn idiot." The journey to the orbital station was tense and silent. Everyone knew the odds were against them. The Vyrath weren't just machines. They were intelligent, adaptive, and relentless. One wrong move, and they'd be dead before they even reached the core chamber. When they arrived, Irin led the charge, moving with precision and purpose. Using her psychic abilities, she disabled enemy patrols and sabotaged security systems, clearing a path for the others. But with every burst of energy, she grew weaker. Sweat dripped from her brow, and her steps became heavier. Still, she pushed forward, refusing to let exhaustion slow her down. "Irin, stop!" Kyle shouted during one particularly intense encounter. They had been ambushed by a squad of elite Vyrath warriors, their sleek armor glinting menacingly in the dim light. Irin unleashed another wave of psychic power, tearing apart their defenses, but the effort left her gasping for air. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "Keep moving." Kale hesitated, torn between following orders and helping her. Finally, he grabbed her arm and pulled her behind cover. "You're not fine," he snapped. "If you keep pushing yourself, you won't make it to the core." Irin met his gaze, her blue eyes blazing with defiance. "Then I'll die doing what I came here to do. Isn't that better than sitting back while everyone else dies?" Kale clenched his jaw, unable to argue. Deep down, he admired her determination, but it terrified him too. She was willing to give everything, even if it meant losing herself in the process. By the time they reached the core chamber, the survivors were battered and bruised, but alive. The room itself was massive, filled with towering machinery and pulsating energy conduits. At the center stood the Overlord, a monstrous fusion of flesh and machine, its glowing red eyes fixed on the intruders. Its presence radiated power and malice, sending chills down everyone's spines. "You should leave," Erin said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear etched across her face. "This is my fight." "No," Kyle replied firmly. "We stick together." Erin hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Together, they advanced toward the Overlord, weapons drawn and hearts pounding. The creature roared, shaking the entire room, and lunged at them with terrifying speed. The battle was brutal. The Overlord's claws slashed through metal and flesh, alike, forcing the survivors to dodge and counterattack with everything they had. Erin unleashed her psychic powers repeatedly, targeting the Overlord's weak points and disrupting its systems, but each attack took a visible toll on her. Blood trickled from her nose and her movements became increasingly unsteady. "You need to go," Erin yelled at Kale, stepping forward to block the Overlord's next strike. "I'll hold it off." "No!" Kale shouted, grabbing her arm. "We finish this together." Erin shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "This is why I'm here, Kale. To give you a fighting chance, trust me." With a final surge of strength, Erin unleashed every ounce of her remaining power. A blinding wave of energy erupted from her body, engulfing the Overlord and collapsing the station's core. The explosion sent shockwaves rippling outward, destroying the fortress and Erin along with it. Back on Earth, Kale stared up at the sky as the debris burned away in the atmosphere. For the first time in years, he felt hope. Before she vanished, Erin had shared a piece of her power with him, awakening something deep within. Now he understood what it meant to be truly human: resilience, sacrifice, and the will to keep fighting, even when all seemed lost. As the sun rose over the ruins of their broken world, Kale turned to the others. Their faces were weary but determined, reflecting the same resolve he felt burning inside him. "We rebuild," he said firmly, his voice carrying across the desolate landscape. For her, and together, they took their first steps toward a new future. In the weeks that followed, Kale began to notice changes, not just in himself but in the others too. The psychic essence Erin had left behind lingered, awakening latent abilities in those who had survived. Some could sense danger before it arrived. Others could manipulate objects with their minds. These newfound powers were raw and unpredictable, but they gave humanity a fighting chance. Kale often found himself thinking about Erin, her courage, her wisdom, and her unwavering belief in their potential. She had given them more than just a weapon. She had given them hope. And as long as they remembered her sacrifice, they would never stop fighting. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Vireth still controlled much of the planet, and rebuilding civilization would take generations. But for the first time in years, humanity had a reason to believe in tomorrow. As Kale stood atop a hill overlooking the ruins of Chicago, he whispered a silent promise to the woman who had saved them all. "We'll make you proud, Erin, I swear it." And with that, he turned and walked back toward the others, ready to lead them into whatever lay ahead.